The AP is reporting that warplanes have repeatedly bombed a complex of 3 schools in northern Syria on Wednesday in what UNICEF is calling one of the deadliest attacks on schools since the Syrian civil war had begun. Now, UNICEF Director Anthony Lake, in response to this, said, look, this is a tragedy, it's an outrage, and if this is deliberate, which is important, then it is a war crime. Children lost forever to their families, teachers lost forever to their students, and it's one more scar on Syria's future. Now, UNICEF claims that the strikes in the village of Has in the rebel stronghold of Idlib killed 22 children and 6 teachers. Now, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the death toll was actually a little higher, 35 people. However, it included fewer children at only 11. So you've got conflicting reports here. You've got one side saying there are more children that are dead, but less adults. The other says, of course, more adults and less children, but nonetheless, any children, anybody included in this is bad enough, and this whole thing is horrific. Now, there's an activist there who lives near the scene of attack that talked to NPR, and his name is Marwan Hamid. Now, he said that 4 teachers lost their lives, so did the school custodian. First responders and neighboring residents were also killed in successive strikes. That's also very important. So, it's like they hit it once, and then the first responders come in, and then they hit it again, and again, and again. Well, right there, that's what makes it especially a war crime. As if hitting a school complex isn't bad enough. They hit it multiple times. He continues, most of the victims were children. Now, he counted 7 airstrikes, most of which hit that town's 3-school complex. He said these were government schools before the war. He says, and would have been known as government schools. That's also very important, because if this is Assad, if these are Assad forces, well, they know. They know what's a government school. They know that there are kids in school. They know. They know what they're doing. They know who they're bombing. And that makes it even worse. Now, Hamid said it was a very hard sight. Some people had cursed the Assad regime. Some had invoked God. And others, they didn't say a word. Now back to NPR, they report that Russian and Syrian planes have been launching multiple airstrikes in the area, which is located about 50 miles southwest of Aleppo. The BBC reports the U.S.-led coalition against the so-called Islamic State has also targeted rival jihadist fighters linked to al-Qaeda who operate there. They also mentioned that it wasn't immediately clear whose planes carried out the strikes. According to Reuters, a report on Syrian state TV quoted a military source as saying a number of militants had been killed when their positions were targeted in Homs, but made no mention of hitting a school. Now, speaking of schools that are caught in the crossfire of this whole thing, I mean, as if it isn't bad enough that these are civilian areas, this is a civilian war zone. These are cities that are being torn apart by these airstrikes, by this war. You also have schools that are being caught in the middle. Now, UNICEF says that it's verified at least 38 attacks on schools around Syria, whether in government-held areas or rebel-controlled territory. Before Wednesday's attack, 32 children were killed in 2016 in attacks on just schools. As the regional chief of communication, Juliette Thoma, told the Associated Press. So, look, obviously, more horrible news from Syria. Okay, more dead. More schools being destroyed, more people being killed, more children dying. This is awful. I mean, what can you really say about this? There's not much more to say other than this is a humanitarian disaster, a humanitarian crisis. Now, I'm sure that after this is, investigated, either Assad or the Russians will say, well, hey, it's the rebels' fault. They blew up their own school. Or they bombed their own school, or whatever. Well, okay, well, there are 2 groups in that area that have warplanes. That would be Assad and the Russians. And look, that military source said, hey, we bomb people in that area. So most likely it's the Assad regime that carried out these strikes. Now, the other thing is when that comes out, Assad's probably going to say, or the government is going to say, yeah, but there were fighters there. That wasn't really a school. No, it was like a training camp for rebels, or the rebels were hiding there. They were using the people and the children as human shields. What deplorable people. What awful people. How dare you use children as shields? Now, the thing about that is, and look, that tends to be the go-to when you bomb someone or bomb a place that you probably shouldn't. That's the go-to, and unfortunately, there's no proof. There's no proof that they were using people as shields. There's no proof on the other way around either, other than the fact that there are dead children. But look, as I mentioned, this war is awful, right? And look, as an American that is sitting here watching, I can't help but think that from my own, American perspective, that there are so many other people in my country that are looking at what's happening in Syria now, and they're looking at the refugees that are the product of this civil war, and they said, hey, you know what? Those refugees, we don't want them. Send them back. Send them back. Send them back. Well, send them back to what? What are you going to send them back to? This? The kind of stuff that's happening now? So they can get caught in between ISIS, the rebels, and Assad and the Russians? So their kids can get blown up into a school by an airstrike that we're not even sure was intentional. Did they intend to hit the school? We don't know. We don't know. And look, beyond talking about what we should do with the refugees that are fleeing from this destruction and this carnage, I don't know what else we can do. Clinton's no-fly zone, for example, terrible idea. Why? Because it would cause a war with the Russians. That's the last thing that we need to do. So I don't know. I don't know. Nobody seems to have a good plan for what to happen. I don't know what to personally do. I mean, other than, of course, urging humanitarian aid and accepting more refugees and doing stuff like that, I don't know what to do. Other than, I guess, hope that the war ends sooner rather than later. I really am at a loss of what's going on. I just am. And if you're not, heartbroken by this whole thing, then I don't know. I question your humanity, because this is a humanitarian crisis, and this is just horrific what's going on. Absolutely horrific. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent, non-corporate media, go to our Patreon page and become a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation.